So, a little while back, we talked about the Wes Huff phenomenon, and I recently watched a video by him and thought that maybe it seemed a little silly and unserious. So, tonight we brought in a somebody who actually has some qualifications to talk about this. We will discuss that video and maybe more tonight on.
Zanza.
Oh, yeah. Well, hello, everybody. Tonight we have Kip Davis here joining us.
Oh, there we go. I'm over there. Hi.
Yeah, this direction. Dan and I, we have fun on this show. We kind of BS back and forth, but from time to time, it's nice to bring in someone who actually knows what they're talking about. We've had Kip here in our chat, saying smarter things than we're usually saying. So I thought, hey, as long as we're not talking about Wes Huff, why not just have him on? How's it going?
It's going very well. I had one line and I pulled it off. So,
the way you said Zanza just tied the whole thing together. Like that was the linchpin of the opening. So good job.
Excellent. Thank you. The pressure was high. I don't know if I've ever noticed before, but you're the tallest atheist show on YouTube. Is that it? That's your guys's.
We've decided to assume that's true, considering that I am 6'3" and Dan is like 6'5". We're like, we have to on average be the tallest atheist stream on YouTube. Maybe we're not, but it seems like it must be true. Steve Weber's asking
that average. Not that tall. No, definitely not. I am under 6 feet. So okay. I like to think that I'm 5'9", 5'10" on a good day, but maybe not even quite that tall. So all I know is that my kids tower over me. So
cool. Well, that's tall enough, I think. In the eyes of the illustrious,
I am tall enough to be on this show. Do you have a sign there? You need one of those. You need the roller coaster sign in the background.
You must be this tall to host the hands. I don't have any people. I don't have people come to my house to check, so you can get away with all kinds of shenanigans as far as that goes. But yeah, as the illustrious Brad Stein would probably say, you personally can relate to little people and call them whatever you want, because that's whatever word you use is your word, according to Brad Stein.
That's it. Yes, you just make it yours.
Please don't blurt that out on our show. Whatever you do on your time. Anyway. Thanks for being here. Is there anything, by the way, that you would like to share that you're up to, or that you just want the audience to know about yourself, or anything like that before we kick it off?
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe if anyone doesn't know, I'm a biblical scholar and a specialist in early Judaism and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I make content about that kind of stuff on YouTube. My primary interest is just really in increasing public engagement with the critical scholarship of the Bible, because I think the Bible's kind of cool. I know I'm weird that way, but and what ends up happening though is that I invariably end up encountering all sorts of terrible Christian apologetics, because all of them fucking suck at the Bible. They just don't know anything about it, and it drives me crazy. So that's what I do. I've got some really cool stuff coming up though. So tomorrow, which is Friday, I'm very excited because Dr. David Carr, who teaches Old Testament at Union Theological Seminary and has written a number of books on the formation of the Pentateuch, on the book of Genesis, on scribal practices in ancient Israel. He's actually going to be on my channel, live on my channel, and we're going to have a conversation about specifically the documentary hypothesis, the supplementary hypothesis, and source theories of the formation of the Torah. And then he's going to, you know, stick around and answer audience questions. So I'm super stoked about that. The time for that is noon Pacific, 3:00 Eastern on my channel tomorrow, and he's going to stick around for 2 hours. So that's coming up.
Nice. Well, that's cool. You know, when you describe what you do, it really puts what we do in context. You know, we kind of watch stuff and fork around over here. So, but yeah, that's really interesting.
Fun though. It's fun.
Yeah.
Guys. It's fun to fuck around.
You know, part of the fun is making fun of yourself. That's what we do here on the show.
Yeah.
So no, but that's all really interesting. You know, I don't think there's anything out of place about thinking the Bible is cool. Like I do too. And part of what irritates me about apologists is they take perfectly good stories that have interesting subtext, and by insisting that they are literally true, they rob it of everything that's interesting about it. And that I find annoying, just as even on the level that I appreciate the Bible as a body of literature and an insight into some ancient people's lives and history.
So you used to teach English, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. See, so you've got a strong appreciation for literature and the high value of literature as a staple of, you know, the humanities and you know, developing our and revealing insights about who we are and our interactions with the world and with each other. And that's honestly that's the Bible as a body of literature is a brilliant text. It's terrific. Don't let it listen. You hear people, there's lots of jaded, cynical people out there who will tell you that the Bible is not even good literature. Well, that's bullshit. It really is. And I'm convinced it's bullshit that's created by people who just don't understand what they're reading. And one of the reasons that happens a lot is because it's an ancient text. It's translated from, you know, these long dead ancient languages. And in the course of all of that, so much of the value of what's in the Bible gets lost in translation. And you're absolutely picking up on part of on a big part of the problem here with so many Christian apologists who all they want to do is just flatten the text. And like you said, remove all the really interesting, cool shit in there. It's great. The Bible's great, everyone.
I might have been guilty of saying something along the lines of what you get frustrated by. I along with teaching English, my little niche I carved out was I taught classical mythology every semester the whole time I was working in public schools. And so that gives me a little bit of not anywhere on the lines of somebody with actual qualifications. You know, I had a 4-year degree and I taught, but I think you develop some sense of where these stories come from just in the process of exploring that and trying to make it interesting from students and everything like that. So I feel like I have some kind of analogy to what the Bible actually is when you take it not too seriously in the wrong ways. But I probably have said things about how it's not as good literature as some people think, because I think I'm used to people overblowing the flattened English fundamentalist version of it to being more than it is. But the story beneath the surface,
to be reactive. Yeah,
it's very interesting as a just a window into the lives and thoughts of people back in the time it was written. And so it is worthwhile. And I think it's really cool that you get people into it as the way you do.
Cool. Yeah. So there's lots of that on my channel.
Nice. Well, are you ready to dive into some Wes Huff?
I am ready to dive into some Wes Huff. So maybe that's how many F-bombs do I get on this channel? You do know who Dapper Dinosaur is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So whenever I'm on his channel, which right now is every Saturday because we're doing this thing, but I'm not allowed to say the F word on his channel.
Oh,
Otherwise I have to pay money. So it's always useful. It's always useful. I'm fortunate that people like it when I swear, so they usually just give money so that I can do it. But you know, um, I do, and then when I'm on occasionally on another show on Sunday nights, called Bad Science Sunday, and Maya Adkisson has a 5 fuck minimum. So it's,
okay.
it's like, it's important to know these things out of the gate.
Yeah. I think you've probably gotten this. I mean, you've been around, you watched us. I think you've gotten the sense we're
It's
not
true.
too
I
super
do.
cautious. We don't have
Yeah.
a swear jar here on Zadanza. But yeah, as long as it doesn't get distracting, I don't care. What I want is for words to flow out of you naturally. And if you're pausing to alter the way you talk in order to avoid F bombs, then that's worse than
Then
just
don't.
letting it fly. Just be yourself. You know,
All right.
even if it gets us demonetized, the money we make on the show is a rounding error. So I mean, who cares? it helps
Sure,
pay the
right?
it helps pay the bills in the
There you
big
go.
picture. But if we miss an episode or two, I barely notice. So just let it fly.
Yeah.
So
So
this video.
maybe
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe before we start, I should also say that I actually know Wes Huff. Um, so we have spoken quite often via
Mhm.
text and on the phone, and I can show you. I'll give you the
Wait, are you
the
saying you have photographic evidence of this?
I have photographic evidence of this. Let me pull it up for you.
God
Um,
damn.
I know, right? Just so everyone, uh, there we go. Can everyone see that? So I have. Oh, you have to. There we
There
go.
you go.
Yeah. So I have met Wes Huff. He is definitely nowhere close to 6 feet. Nowhere close. The other gentleman in the picture is another Christian apologist by the name of Ruslan KD, I think is his name. But yes, so I feel like I know Wes Huff maybe better than a lot of people
Nice.
in the YouTubes, in the interwebs space. So yeah. So let's watch this
So
video.
proof that Wes Huff has met someone famous. Uh,
I knew
so
Wes before he was famous.
really, wow.
Yes. So I was
So
I
is
was
was this in a
actually
professional capacity? Because he actually has some qualifications, right? Or does he?
yeah, he does, and we can talk a little bit about that as we go through this. But
Okay.
I mean, just to give you the rundown of this, so I was on a podcast in September called the Danny Jones podcast. And shortly after my appearance, Wes actually called me, reached out to me. He was the one who first contacted me just to get a sense of my experience because he was, contacted to go on the same show. So I just kind of talked to him about that, and we just continued chatting. So when he actually sat down and had his interaction with Billy Carson, I knew all about this when it happened because he's texting me and telling me about everything that was going on for weeks before any of the stuff actually made it public. And I think at the time, right, like he had about 5,000 subscribers on his
Mhm.
channel, and then as soon as that Billy Carson thing aired and blew up, I think he had like a quarter million in the space of
Yeah,
like 4 weeks. It was crazy. But
that's wild.
anyways, I know, isn't it nuts? What a world.
Yeah. So this specific video I thought was interesting, and I've had this in my back pocket for a while, with the
Mm,
idea that we might get you on at some point. But I put on here something about silly theatrics, and that's something that really struck me about this video is just how much of it's just pure fluff and just nothing. You know what I mean? As far as what he says and the amount of effort he puts into putting on displays. I guess we'll talk about this as we go in. So that's my context, and that's why that's my thought process going into this video and why I titled it the way I did. So I don't know if you have anything to add on that front, or if you just want to dive right
let's do
into
it, man.
All right, let's go.
With all the work that you've done in seminary, with your doctoral work in the area of theology and manuscripts, what got you interested in the Bible?
I realized that I was engaging with a lot of people, with Muslims, with Mormons, with Jehovah's Witnesses, skeptics of all different stripes. All of them would resort to some sort of, well, that sounds great, Wes, but all you're relying on is the Bible. That's your foundation. And you can't trust that. All you have are translations of translations of translations. All you have are error-ridden copies. You don't even know if you have the right books. You're reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but have you ever heard of the Gospel of Thomas? And so I realized that that was a genuine critique if it was true. If that was true, I'm staking my entire life on the person of Jesus. And where do I find the information about Jesus? I find that in the Bible. And if I can't trust the Bible, I really have no reason to put my hope and trust in Jesus.
Yeah. So, there's a lot there to talk about.
There is.
There's a lot. Where do you want to start?
You go ahead and fire off whatever you're thinking.
Okay. Well, let's first of all, maybe we should just get this out of the way too. Let's talk a little bit about Wes's academic background and his qualifications. So he has, I believe he has either a sociology degree or a criminology degree, undergrad. Okay. And then he went and did a master's of theological studies, what's called an MTS, excuse me, at Tyndale Seminary in Toronto, which is I believe it's actually the largest seminary. It's an evangelical seminary, but I believe it's the largest seminary in the country, here in Canada. And he went from there to do a master's of theology at the Toronto School of Theology. A master's of theology is kind of like a 1 year, or maybe sometimes even like a 2-year add-on to usually like a master's of divinity, or in this case, an MTS degree, where I believe most of them are thesis based. So you actually have to write like a substantial paper in order to graduate. And he went from the Toronto School of Theology, his THM at the Toronto School of Theology, into the PhD program. Now, he will say that his PhD is at the University of Toronto. And this is, I have every reason to think this is true. But one of the things that I feel is important to stress is that the University of Toronto is not like most other universities here in North America. It's much more similar to like the old schools in the UK, like Cambridge or Oxford, or like the University of Paris, where the universities are actually like these consortiums of smaller colleges grouped together, and they all exist under this umbrella, right? Like at the University of Oxford, I think there's something like 31, 32 individual colleges. So the University of Toronto is like that. And I believe, I don't know for sure, but I believe that he is in his PhD program via the Toronto School of Theology at the University of Toronto. So while properly it's a University of Toronto PhD, and like no question, I know a lot of people who have graduated from the Department of Ancient Near Eastern Studies at the University of Toronto, and they are phenomenal scholars, and their training was highly rigorous. However, I am also aware that not every department or school in this larger affiliation of the University of Toronto has the same rigorous standards. So I don't know what Wes's PhD program looks like. I've seen his basic abstract for his dissertation. It looks like an interesting project, an interesting paper of study. But it's also important to note that to this date, so far to this point, Wes has not published anything. Which is also a little unusual. Usually by the time you are a PhD student he's in his final year, in your final year, you've got 1, 2, maybe even 3 publications under your belt. You've been developing your chops a little bit as an academic. Wes has not published anything to this date. So we have no way of evaluating the quality of his scholarship and who he actually is. It's kind of interesting because he got so big so fast, so visible. All of a sudden he's on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Wes is like a neophyte, like he's a baby.
Yeah.
In my world, nobody knows who he is and no one cares because he hasn't done anything yet. Like,
Yeah.
he really hasn't. We just have no way to know what the quality of his work is. So I continue to say I remain eager to see the output, the dissemination of his work through his program. And until that point, I will reserve judgment. So yeah, so those are his qualifications. But it's very interesting to me, Zod, because I like, as I'm listening to him and I reflect back on just my own experiences going into academic biblical studies, academic biblical criticism, working with Dead Sea Scrolls manuscripts, and the journey that got me there. It just, in so many ways, it's so different. I mean, one of the things that I honestly don't think I ever thought through at any point in my certainly not after my undergrad, like once I was into my graduate training, there was never any thought or any goal of like, how do these manuscripts affect my faith or my own my own feelings as a Christian. I was asking so many different questions than he's asking, just because, like, we'll talk a little bit about this as we go through, like manuscripts because this is the thing, right? One of the big things is that we use the manuscripts to validate the Bible. That on its own, as a statement, you can take that to mean a whole bunch of different things, right?
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
like, when I think of that statement as it pertains to the work that I do, it's looking at how scribes have been transmitting these stories or these letters or these histories or these poems within the biblical text, and maybe some of their tracking their own rationale for making decisions that they made along the way. But the manuscripts that I'm dealing with, Dead Sea Scrolls are like first century BC, first century CE. Well, they're already, not nearly as old as these texts. Like, there's a long life of these texts well before any of these manuscripts were made. So they're only useful to a point in tracking like this question of reliability, right? Like whether or not the story in 2 Kings chapter 24 about the destruction of the city of Jerusalem in 586 BCE, whether or not that aligns and tracks with what actually happened. The fact that I've got a first century BCE manuscript of that event doesn't help me to answer that question,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of that going on. It's just kind of curious to me the ways in which apologists will marshal manuscript evidence to
Mhm.
bolster their own case or their own ideas, because like I can go in a completely different direction with this too, right?
Yeah.
Where on the one hand, Wes is going to talk about the dates of manuscripts and then how close they are to, you know, what we assume to be the quote unquote original text, right?
Mhm.
I can go in the other direction and say, you know, you can track the differences that are there in the manuscripts and get back in time to a certain point, and then, oh, look at this wider picture, this
Mhm.
wider scribal picture of all sorts of different kinds of texts that aren't in the Bible, that were being produced at the same time. And nobody was, you know, nobody was labeling things at this point as like scripture versus non-scripture. How does that affect our picture of what's happening? And, you know, again, it kind of helps to point in the opposite direction backwards to a time when it seems like there were enough differences that there was ongoing question and confusion about the quote unquote original text.
Yeah.
I'll shut up now.
Yeah. I guess what strikes me about this, I think you really hit on something, which is, I think, just the feel of the approach of it. Like, it's interesting to me
Mm.
that you point out that he hasn't published anything, because what he does in this video feels like it's so stylized and so built for the masses. It just seems like he's kind of decided, he got a little bit of fame and decided to go in another direction. Uh, the comments scrolled up a bit, but yeah, it's Jessica Bell. She said, "Is this a History Channel documentary? This feels very, very put together. There's a lot of scenes, you know, and you'll see
Very
this
slick.
as you go on. You know, he did not just carry a camera and walk around and randomly shoot whatever happened. There are a lot of very staged shots in this thing, and it's, I don't know. He has never struck me as somebody who's showing up to do serious academic work or to address serious
Mm,
academic questions. And
no.
the the bigger thing that struck me, number one, a lot of what they said, it was very rapid fire, but it sounded like it was a little bit planned, if not scripted, because they were peppering us with things that implied qualifications on his part, even if they weren't serious academic
Mm,
qualifications. It's a lot about, I've gone and talked to all these people, and I've, s- there's a lot of like puffed up qualification sounding things targeted at people in the pews. But then even more, the bigger thing I think he does there is, like you said, the questions you're interested in as an actual scholar, an actual, like, dispassionate questions of scholarship and trying to understand the texts. What he's doing is way different than that, but it's also very, very targeted. Like, can I trust the Bible? Is I know he's trying to get to some relationship with a personage of Jesus through the text, and can he trust the text to that
yeah.
extent? That's a bizarre question to begin with. But then he puts the stakes on, like, well, can have these been reliably transmitted? What are their dates? Um, and he likes to go toward this question of, well, how do we compare these to other gospels? Are these gospels silly compared to the other? Like,
Oh,
those,
yeah.
I guess you can
Yeah.
go in a real direction with those, but do those have anything at all to do with a question of, can I trust this text to the point of feeling like I have a relationship with Jesus and he's the perfect son of God? Those are so far disconnected that Wes just strikes me as a very unserious person.
Yeah.
And more than that, it feels deliberate. Like, he feels like he's setting up these stakes in I don't know. He sounds like he knows better when he's doing it. I don't want to say that he does, but it strikes me as deliberate apologetics. That's, I don't
But
know.
you're right. Like even like this question of can I trust the Bible? I think is what this film is called, right?
Mhm.
Uh ask that question of any other piece of literature produced at the same time, and it
Yeah.
sounds ridiculous. Can I trust The Republic by Plato? Can I trust the Gallic Wars by Caesar? Can I trust Ahikar, which is a very, very old Aramaic text that was popular among Jewish groups long before this time? But like, it's just not like this is not a question that scholars are asking. Scholars don't approach a manuscript or a text and go, "Can I trust this?"
Yeah.
It's,
Can
no,
I trust?
can I trust the symposium? Says Jessica Bell. Yeah, you're picking up on this. Like, but isn't that just the way though? Like, it just demonstrates the way in which they have privileged this text, the Bible,
Yeah.
because they have to.
Yeah, I'm no scholar. I don't really know how to tackle this on a methodical level. I don't know the methodology of history or textual criticism, but I feel like it's pretty safe to say that if you're trusting a text, you're doing it wrong. That
Yes. And honestly, that's what we discover when we go to into antiquity, right? Like,
yeah.
no, I mean, if you're looking for something that's going to tell you meaningful things about the history of the period, you can't really trust anything. You have to be very judicious and
Yeah.
careful in terms of how you're evaluating all this literature. And you're going to discover that the same text is going to give you useful information, interesting information that tracks, while at the same time giving you a whole bunch of bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
it just, yeah.
Jake Kelsey says you're also not a cold case detective, which that's a common line. I'm no cold case detective, but I also like that
I know.
because I think it relates to this a little bit, because J. Warner Wallace likes to talk about how when he's a detective, he's just really jaded and hearted toward all these criminals. You don't trust a word they say. You can get glimpses of things from their stories, but you also always have to be on guard. And I feel like that's the same way you should be with a text, an ancient text especially, but any text. You want to glean things from it, but you never fall back on your heels and just take it at its face value. Otherwise, you're going to go in weird directions, and the authors are, from the grave going to take you for a ride like a criminal that you should be interrogating.
Yeah.
And the fact that Wes wants to get to that tells me something about the seriousness of what he's trying to do. And I don't know.
Yep.
Well,
Agreed.
Wallace is an interesting dichotomy too, because he should know that, because he talks about that distrust and then turns around and looks to trust the Bible on this weird level. And Wes is doing the same thing. And that dichotomy between their professional credentials and what they should know versus how they approach this text and what they're trying to get from it.
He's using that, right? Like, he's using that veneer of skepticism as a way to bolster the value of his evaluation of the biblical text, even though he's taken just an outrageously credulous approach to the text, right? Like, it's almost like gaslighting the audience with regards to so anyhow.
All right, let's go. We got to make some headway through this thing.
We do. It's gonna take forever. The right books.
Right.
Hey, Andy Steiger here.
Wes Huff.
We are on our way to the airport, heading to Egypt to talk about the Bible.
There's a lot of confusion about the Bible, what it is, where it came from.
This doesn't look at all scripted.
Because the Bible didn't always look like this. The word Bible comes from the Greek word for books. But where did this mini ancient library of books come from? What we call the Bible.
Yeah, like that's what makes this whole thing just feel deeply insincere. It's not just the questions he set up and all that stuff, but they're sitting there acting like they're packing their car and, oh, I happen to have a Bible here and I'm just talking. This is planned
camp,
it's so
right?
the back and forth is so obviously scripted, but then everything they say is so straight out of apologetics. Like, yeah.
It totally is.
Anyway, and we're gonna see back and forth. He goes
Oh,
from talking to like these voiceover pre-planned things. Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. No. I was just gonna say, let's watch this because
Okay.
there's a bunch of things to say here.
Okay.
Was put together over 1,600 years on 3 continents by close to
1600
40
years.
authors in 3 different languages. Some of its writers
Okay.
were kings,
Pause it
others
there.
teachers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you'd have stuff to say about that.
I bet you've heard this before, and I bet anyone in your audience who has any familiarity at all with Christian apologetics has heard this before. The
Well,
Bible
yeah,
is a text that was
Bodhi
produced over
Hodge says it like
1600 years.
every chance he breathes, basically.
Yes. This is
In the
this is
exact
a
same words.
1600 years. What is he talking about?
Sorry, Bodhi
Like he
Bacham, I got his
doesn't.
name wrong for some reason.
Okay. He doesn't clarify what he means, what specific 1600 years those are. Presumably it's like if you think if you're thinking as he's thinking that the last books of the Bible were probably produced at the end of the 1st century AD CE, then that must mean that the first books were produced in the 1500s BCE. That's the fucking Bronze Age. That's before the existence of any kingdom of Israel or kingdom of Judah. That is so no, it was not. The Bible was not produced over a period of 1600 years. In fact, it was probably produced over a period of maybe only 500 years. These are the sorts of questions that scholars debate, and it's complicated because a lot of the literature can't there's snippets of literature that are very old, even though we're not totally clear on how to date it. But a lot of the work that went into putting together just the Old Testament took place quite late, like 300 BCE, kind of late. So that's that. And then 3 continents. That's like Asia, Africa, and Europe, right?
Yeah.
But it's a funny way of saying it.
Yeah.
when you think about what they're actually talking about is like Palestine, Egypt, and Greece. Like it's
Yeah.
it's the Eastern Mediterranean. So yeah, these are inflationary claims. And then 3 languages. That's true, and it sounds kind of impressive. One of those languages, it's predominantly Hebrew and Greek. There's a little bit of Aramaic in a couple of texts of the Old Testament, namely Nehemiah and in the book of Daniel. And the fact that there's Aramaic texts in the book of Daniel in particular is incredibly problematic for evangelicals for reasons I won't get into. But this is all, it's all this inflationary stuff. And here's the thing that strikes me about this. When he says a sentence like this, it just demonstrates to me that, you either do not understand the field of biblical studies and biblical criticism in which you are supposedly earning a degree, or you are just choosing to ignore all of that, because this is a thoroughly apologetic talking point that no one in scholarship takes seriously. Just no one.
Yeah. Like there's all the part I don't understand as far as are those actual dates true and stuff like that. That's more your field, and I couldn't really speak to that. But just purely on the surface, taking this at face value, a surface level reading of this is obviously a horseshit thing to say from start to finish. Like, yeah, 3 continents. Everybody's saying it in the chat too. We all know this. You happen to be at the crossroads of 3 places that we arbitrarily label as continents. That's fucking meaningless. 3 languages. Okay, sure. These different languages happen to have been like inserted into this at some point. The 40 authors thing and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure even I can say as a layperson, he's just taking the traditional claims at face value and then using them to validate the claims. So the fact
so many of
even
those
I
texts.
know even I know as a layperson, the fact that you would act like it's impressive that this thing touched on 3 continents, that's intentional puffery, and you're playing to an audience in this total huckster bullshitty way that is beneath the dignity of somebody who should consider themselves an academic. So I don't know. That just really, really, and that's before you take away the fact that you could just you could probably take Vodi Bakum and him and whoever else, you could probably line up their audio and it would you'd almost barely hear an echo because the timing and phrasing of this is exactly the same for all of them. So he's just rattling off an apologetic talking point. This is not serious work of any kind. It's so crazy.
Yeah, it is.
We did get a couple super chats. Thank you.
Hey.
Reconstructed Bible says
Reconstructed
Wes
Bible.
falls for the propaganda that is the Bible hook, line, and sinker.
Yep.
And
he sure does.
Teriyaki Gopherwood Artist says, Kip, you forgot pre-Yiddish.
So it's always nice. It's always nice when tropes and lore from other channels where I make appearances shows up in the chat. So that's who is that? I think that's Raw Matt. He's like he's a fucking weirdo, and just a terrible person, and some kind of health. I don't know a lot about him, but I know for a fact that he identified the original language, the one that was spoken before Babel, from where everything came, pre-Yiddish apparently. So yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, that one line is just baffling to me. Like, you have just absolutely sold out your any pretense of academic credibility just to pander to a preset audience. And I don't know. Yep. It would seem like if you had any intention of being taken seriously, that you would at least soften that a little bit. Like, you could finesse that and pander to your audience without just rattling things that sound like you just read them straight out of another apologist book. But I don't know. I guess that would take work.
Shepherds, and fishermen. The early Christians inherited the Jewish scriptures, what we call the Old Testament, a collection composed of the same 39 books we have in the first portion of our Bibles.
The same 39
contrary to what many
books.
believe or have heard.
Sure.
you go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I mean, never mind the fact that that there are quotations from the books of Enoch in the New Testament, which are not part of Wes's canon of 39. It's at this, and this is my wheelhouse, right? Is the shape of scripture at the time of Jesus, which in some respects is sort of a loaded question, just because what we discover as scholars is that Jewish communities, people, living in and around Palestine or in Jewish communities around the Mediterranean, they had a lot of literature that they all liked. A lot of them liked a lot of the same literature, like the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, a bunch of the prophets, the Psalms maybe, or the book of Proverbs. And they liked a lot of other things too, like the books of Enoch or the book of Jubilees or Achikar, or texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls, like one called Instruction, or the Song of the Sage, or like all these things that nobody's ever heard of because they got lost over time. But there was this rich literary picture in early Judaism, and they seem to have had differing opinions amongst themselves of what was so-called scripture, or important, really, is just the way to think of it at this point in time. Old and really important, and what wasn't. So while, like, take for example the community that wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls, they seem to have considered the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, as really important as scripture, for lack of a better term, as well as the book of Isaiah and the book of Psalms, some of the minor prophets. They don't seem to have had much use for texts like the books of Kings, or Chronicles, or Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, or some of the minor prophets, even they didn't seem to care much about. So maybe just tone it down a bit, Wes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it with him on a lot of things.
The New Testament books were not chosen or voted on, but instead were recognized as the writings closest to the community surrounding Jesus.
Okay, that's a quick stop there, but ever since I've been watching this, I was curious what you would say about that part.
I don't, here's part of the problem of doing a lot of this kind of work, is that you're conducting historical investigations on the basis of the textual data that we have, all of which was produced by sympathetic authors. So, and there's a word for this, right? The word is propaganda. And I'm currently working on a book right now. I'm almost finished. And this is the general theme, is evaluating the literature of the Old Testament from this perspective, always keeping in mind that this is a form of propaganda, that the authors of these texts are promoting an ideology and a sanctioned version of their story, their history, their laws. And as a result, as an historian, you have to, very carefully consider what you're reading, what you're dealing with. When it comes to the testimonies, the later testimonies from the later church authors, as to the text of the New Testament canon and the process for determining the limitations of the text of the New Testament canon, you have to recognize that they're feeding you a narrative. Like, it's all by design. And this isn't my area, but I know enough to know that this entire process of canonization is something that looks to have started as a result of the fact that Marcion, who was deemed a heretic, a 2nd century heretic by the church, like members of the Christian community. There were groups within Christianity who really didn't like Marcion, but he was really the first one to say, hey, let's put some limits on what we actually consider to be quote unquote scripture. He made his list, and a bunch of other churches did not like that list, but it prompted them to then do the same thing and say, all right, we have to figure this out. What's in, what's out. I find it very interesting that the process is it's reactionary in the first place. It was something that the church was pushed into, and then our sense of what actually happened is very sanitized,
Yeah.
to the point where, you know, let's be careful how seriously we take the ways in which these authors are presenting the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm no cold case detective, but it sounds a little suspicious when he says there was no vote. They just like they had some
It just
systematic
happened.
process
They
for
just all had this. They all had this
Yeah.
sense of these are in, and this is. We all agree. We all agree, Zod. It's all. Yeah,
they just
everyone
knew these
agreed.
books were closest to Jesus. These were the people who were
Yeah,
closest to Jesus.
that's the one. Yes,
Yeah.
those are the ones.
So, by the way, just we're trudging through this a little slowly. Would you feel like going a little breaking our hour and a half deadline to keep this up a little bit, or do you
Yeah, I can.
need to cut?
I can go longer
Okay.
if you want. That's
I'll
totally
I'll
cool.
just leave. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'll leave that up to you. If
No,
we
yeah,
do, I
that's
might
fine.
need to leave you in the middle of a good rant and step up for just a second. But we'll do that here in a minute, maybe.
No problem.
Actually have is a direct connection to the life and teaching of Jesus. Jesus' disciples mentored others who we call the Apostolic Fathers, who then comment on what books did or didn't have a history, going back to the words and teachings of Jesus.
Again, a very sanitized list, a very intentionally curated list. The story is a crafted narrative, and we have to be very, very careful when we are approaching crafted narratives.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. Is just, I mean, for me, this smells a little like bullshit to me. But that's a good point, that this is a very carefully crafted, controlled narrative, and that's just not how things plausibly work. And Christians, to one extent or another, without realizing it, I think, just have some totally unrealistic, unscholarly idea of these just like appearing and being recognized as the right books and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't recognize, even when I was a non-believer and I started to become actively atheist, until I started listening to people like Bart Ehrman, or just some of these popular people who would at least give you a glimpse into a scholarly approach and what the actual process of coming up with these texts look like. That just like blew my mind as far as how simplistically I was still seeing these things. And it's wild. Just, I don't know. But I guess you're doing people a real favor when you go around, just if nothing else, just starting to expose what the actual history looks like and how messy
I
and
hope
everything
so.
it is.
And it's so much more fun and interesting that way too.
Yeah.
Like, because you can, I do believe that if you're not everywhere, but in a number of the texts within the Bible, if you're a careful reader, and if you know what you're looking for, you can actually detect some hints, some echoes of some subversive voices lingering behind the text. There's some things that made it in that, you know, were not part of, you know, the agenda of the winning side, and it's fun to point those out. And then it's fun to kind of set those against the majority narrative, right? And just to see, you know, what the conflict, the real actual conflict that's taking place within these communities as they are developing their own worldview, their own religion. I mean, for Christ's sake, within just the New Testament, we know at the outset that Paul and the Jerusalem church, headed by Peter and James, did not see eye to eye. And if you look carefully through the text, you can detect some of the things about which they disagreed strongly. But here's the thing. We only have this one side, right? This one side of this conversation, this dispute, this argument, and it's Paul's. We have nothing at all from the Jerusalem church. And wouldn't it be interesting to see what the other side of this argument, this dispute, this discussion actually looked like? These are the sorts of questions that I love as a scholar and an historian.
Yeah, because a lot of what we have with the Bible is it's been very curated by just the church,
The
right?
winners.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the winners determined what's out there, and that's probably largely why we have so many copies of the Bible, is because they're methodically hanging on to all these little scraps that would have been thrown away, and so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It became popular, or it gained power, and then produced all these texts and maintained all these texts, and then those texts are used. Yeah,
It's totally true.
So, Wes, why are we going to Egypt to talk about the Bible? I think a lot of
Good
people would
question.
assume that we'd be going to Israel.
Yeah, if you're talking about the content of the Bible,
This
where
is,
the events actually...
This is the Vancouver International Airport, which is just over there. It's that way.
Oh, wow, nice.
So, yeah. So this guy, I'll say something here. This guy, the other gentleman, is Andy Steiger, who is the president of Apologetics Canada, who is Wes's employer. He works for Apologetics Canada. I know a little bit about this because I went to they have their big annual conference at their headquarters, which is located just literally 30-40 minutes away from me. So I actually went this year. So he's the president of the ministry that Wes works for. Wes is the regional director out in Toronto, which is on the other side of the country here. But so they're flying out of Vancouver though.
Interesting.
It's a
Yeah, I like
lovely
the
place.
question, why are we going to Egypt? Because it sounds a little differently depending on how you hear it. They're asking, why are you going versus going to Israel? But to me, the question is, as you watch this, what information did they gain by what they flew over and walked around doing? And it doesn't seem like much. But again, maybe that's me with my lack of cold case detective experience.
took place, then you're going to go to Israel. But if you're talking about the text of the Bible, the earliest copies of those that we have come from Egypt.
So, and of course, he's talking about the New Testament, right?
Yeah.
So, the Bible. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're just talking about the New Testament, the oldest copies that we have of the Hebrew Bible are all in Israel. It's where the Dead Sea Scrolls are.
I just love the amount of effort they put into just like presentational flourishes and things that are going to look impressive to a lay audience sitting in the pews. It's just pretty wild. They even do the Indiana Jones thing.
Oh, totally.
Hey, welcome to Egypt. We just got through security. We're here. We got our driver, Mohammed. He's going to be taking us to our hotel.
We're driving through the streets of Cairo. We're going to be heading over to the pyramids, see some of the Great Pyramid. We're going to be going to a few other archaeological sites before we actually head into the meat and potatoes of looking at some of the influential biblical sites. But for this first day, we're just going to be doing a little bit of the touristy stuff, making a day of it.
Look at that.
See, I love some of those. I love some of those like glorious walking shots. Like again, that's not they're on a trip and someone took out their phone and they staged those shots to look a certain way. And just the fact that okay, I have this limited amount of time to make my point about the Bible. So here's a whole thing about my tourist part of my trip. Like,
they also took advantage of the fact that they had all this ministry money to go over and make this film to do just a bunch of sightseeing, which is totally irrelevant to the project at hand. But I get it. I probably would have done the same thing. I don't know. Egypt is cool. It's neat. It's a nice place.
I would definitely go do that if I had the chance. It feels a little weird in this video. Maybe it depends on how you take this video. Like if this is just him talking to his people, like, hey, look at this cool stuff I saw. That's kind of neat. But it feels a little bit more like as a substitute for actual like qualifications or actual good points he's making, just flashing, hey, look at, I saw all these ancient things. I think that's I don't know, uneducated Christian's version of being smart. That I don't know.
Well, he's been to Egypt. He saw their pyramids with his own eye bulbs.
Another super chat from Sonic Shroom. I feel like most of history is a giant gaslighting campaign by Christians.
It can feel like that, can't it?
Yeah, it's. I think there's. I don't know how entirely true that is, but it feels like there is a bit of truth to that, at least within a certain realm.
Welcome to Egypt.
Be careful with the camels in Egypt. They're ferocious.
It's just beautiful out here today. The sun's out, it's hot, a little bit sweaty. Having an incredible time here in Egypt.
Egypt has thousands of years of history with one of the world's.
This I don't know. There's not much here, but this feels feels condescending. Like it's just they're taking us through a very briskly edited series of like I don't know, credibility establishing things like, oh yeah, here's some exotic music. Here's a Middle Eastern looking guy.
Camels. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm riding on camels.
Look, we're eating the local cuisine.
Yeah, exactly.
Oldest civilizations.
I mean, I'll give it to
direct
them.
crossover with
On the person.
You know, I don't know if you've ever heard of there's a Christian apologist on YouTube by the name of Dr. David A. Falk. He runs a channel called Egypt. I think it's Ancient Egypt and the Bible is what it's called. But he recently took a tour group to Egypt, and one of the things that was on their itinerary was eating at Egyptian McDonald's for some reason. I'm like, dude, like, what do you do? Why? Like, what? Really? That's one of the things. Really? Okay. Yeah, I guess.
Jessica Bell really summed it up. Orientalism much?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm so cool and so smart and streetwise that I went and hung out with these weird people in these weird places. I don't know, it smells weird to me.
Pharaoh's tombs that make archaeology in this country so significant. Egypt lays claim to another title. Because of its dry climate and the fact that the papyrus plant, used as writing material in the ancient world, grew almost exclusively here, Egypt ends up being where the vast majority of our earliest surviving biblical manuscripts come from. But other books were also found, ones that claimed to be Christian, but that the earliest church condemned. Egypt is a key location in exploring
to be Christian. Like an untoward claim. How dare they? You can't do that. The nerve.
That seems like a deeply unscholarly thing to say now that you bring it up.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
As somebody who's supposed to be skeptically approaching all these texts and claims and stuff like that, he has this preset notion that there is a Christianity and that going back to the very beginning, you can be Christian wrong.
Yeah, right. Yes, this is it. It's these things and everything else is not. But
yeah, yep. I'm not a scholar, but I'm starting to feel like he might have too many preset conclusions. That's just my layman's view of this whole thing.
This is apologetics, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
The story of this library of ancient books that we call the Bible. Given its fame, there's no surprise the Bible has held its share of controversy. Occasionally, we hear confusing narratives surrounding its origins. Accounts of scandal, suppression, and rewriting. Stories of lost books and wild.
Flew him here and established all these places. They took all. I know they had this list of places and they had these shots they wanted to get, and they totally went through and photographed him in the right light and stuff. It's just like, okay, I'm gonna stand and pretend I'm looking through this glass at this document. Okay, get the shot. Okay, we're good. Now let's move on.
Establishing shot, the movie.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is.
There's nothing that they learned on this trip that they couldn't have just figured out where they were at, right?
No,
unless I'm missing something.
It was 100% completely unnecessary.
This is a footage gathering expedition.
It really is. Yes.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
No. All I was going to say is I've done some media before, and those establishing shots are like that. That is the most awkward thing ever. I had this. I remember when I was filming a documentary at the Museum of the Bible, they had me looking at like a display case with manuscript fragments in it, and they're like, "Okay, get closer," and I'm like this, and they're like, "No, closer," and I'm like this, and they're like, "Closer," and I'm like, my nose is practically fucking touching the glass, right? I can't see anything. I'm like, you know how it is when you're like this close to something, like
Yeah.
it's literally this far from your eyeballs, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's good, that's amazing, it's incredible." I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done in my entire life, but I mean, I'll give them credit. Like the filmmakers know what they're doing, because it did. Like after the fact, I'm like, oh yeah, that does look great. But oh my God, in the moment, this feels stupid. Anyways,
Yeah.
establishing
A
shots.
lot of them are cool looking shots, but like when there's this pretense that we're just hopping in our car and flying over to Egypt to figure out if
Yeah.
the Bible's true, it looks really
Solving a
corny to me.
mystery, this ancient mystery.
Conspiracies still make news headlines 2,000 years later.
To be a lost gospel.
Story about the lost gospel.
I'm holding the Lost Gospel of Thomas.
Do these new readings finally prove that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married?
These clickbait headlines leave many questions. Can I really trust the Bible?
Is that the
The
question?
Bible hasn't always looked like it does today.
Is that the
For hundreds-
question? Like, really?
Yeah.
So why do they use like those terms, lost gospel, secret gospel? Like, what is that about? What's behind that, right? It's not, I don't believe that it's about raising doubts or uncertainty about the curated 66 book or 27 book New Testament canon text in this case. I don't think that's what these, and I mean, let's be clear, like I mean, he's right that these are all super clickbaity, and that when scholars actually dig into this stuff, it's not really what, you know, people tend to think it is. But there is something there in terms of what scholars are doing, what we're trying to discover and understand when it comes to evaluating other texts written by Christians for Christian communities, seemingly in and around the same time as the New Testament texts were written. Or, you know, we're looking at questions about, well, what's going on? Why were these books written? Why are they not in the Bible? Why are those that are in the Bible there? Like, it's more about attempting to discover what's behind that curated narrative, right?
Yeah.
It's a way of trying to figure out what was really going on in, you know, early Christianity, apart from this sanitized narrative about what was going on behind early Christianity, right? But no, he doesn't, like, that's not the question that Wes is asking. The question he's asking is this reliable? I don't. Is it? Can I trust it? Because there's other books. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird to me that that's the question. It's not my question.
Well, and he has a tactic that he uses throughout this whole thing, which is even his choice of where to travel. Nothing comes out of the nuance of like, why are we traveling to Egypt? What's the actual substantial reason we're going there? It's always, well, Egypt, because it's not Israel. There's a, you know, I give you a dilemma, and this is why I picked one out of the two. Do I trust the Bible? Well, it's either trusting it completely and implicitly in every way,
Or not at
to the
all.
point of, or it's these alternative gospels. And here he's doing the same thing. He establishes the question, can I trust the Bible? But then I know that some of these, like, I don't know, lost gospel things or whatever, there's probably a lot of like History Channel level sensationalized stuff. but he uses that as a tool just to give something to contrast. Haha, this is this silly stuff about lost gospels and
Yeah,
Jesus, Mary,
right.
Magdalene, and it's making his thing look more serious by comparison. Like, that's not all a scholarly thing to do. The nuance is not between absolute trust in the Bible and History Channel garbage. And him trying to set it up that way is just trying to like, hey, here's something that looks less serious than us as Christians. Ha ha ha. Now do you see why I believe?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing, not all Christians, but there's a certain sphere of modern Christians who want to feel like they should take their faith seriously. And there's nothing they love more than something that's less serious than their own faith. We have another
Sorry,
super
I picked at
chat.
that one.
What's that?
No, I picked at this one, and I'll probably.
The real question is, can we trust biblical
scholars? There's
I feel like there's probably some inside jokes going through here.
Yeah, a few. My people are here. So I did I don't do this as a rule, but I was pressured into doing an impromptu late night stream on a Saturday last weekend, and I probably had a little bit too much to drink, and but this was seriously a comment and it looked like a serious comment that someone left on the video that I and my friend Nitty were watching, where they said, "This is not biblical."
Nitty, by the way, another $10 from him. I love biblical streams. Thank you, Nitty.
They're my favorite, Nitty. Good to see you.
Aye.
Look, they're all coming out now.
Yeah.
Listed as independent scrolls and writings. But how can we know that this mini ancient library we call the Bible contains the right books? What about the other books that talk about Jesus from the ancient world that are not included in the Bible?
The right books for what should be the question. Like, what?
Yeah.
It also presumes there's some wrong books for some reason, right? It just, no, I never, so I've never discovered an ancient manuscript. I just haven't. But I'd like to think if I ever did, the first question I asked would not be, is this the right book? I'd like to hope that that's not the first question I would ask. And I would also expect that it's a question I would never ask, because what the hell? What are we talking about? I mean, we know what he's talking about, but this is deeply unserious. This is apologetics, right? I love this.
How he's pointing at the wall.
I love this just because I know Wes, right?
Yeah.
So these are hieroglyphics inside of one of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, or in Luxor. I actually think the last establishing shot was Luxor. The thing is, I know that Wes doesn't actually read hieroglyphics, so this pretend like you're reading these. I'll be like, if I was put in this position, ask someone also who does not read ancient hieroglyph or any hieroglyphics, I would probably I would prefer to say, do I have to? Because like, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, I wouldn't want to leave the wrong impression.
Yeah.
Wes, I wouldn't.
Is there something else nearby with equally cool lighting that I could point at?
Yes, right. What?
Just
Oh, it
went-
looks, it's ancient. You know, all the ancient languages, they're all the same, right? Why don't you just read that? How
This
hard
reminds
can
me
it be?
when my dad and I would go hiking, one inside joke we develop is we would just point, we just take a picture of each other pointing at nothing. And feels like what he's doing. It's okay,
This
point at
is
something, Wes, to look smart.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
So are you seriously telling me though that in your advanced studies that you've never taken a how to tell the right book from the wrong book class? They don't offer that course?
I miss that, you know, maybe that's in Wes's PhD program at the University of Toronto. It wasn't in mine. So, you know, maybe I did miss that one.
Yeah, that's where the real understanding between Wes and his audience comes out. Like he's painting this veneer of academic credibility over this, but at its core, the fact that comes through, that's what he's talking about. Yeah, the question, how do you tell the right books? That says it all. They have books that they want to get to some kind of trust in, and
You want to arrive at the right answer.
Yeah.
You want to get to the right books. How do we do it? Let's read these hieroglyphics on this tomb inscription here. That'll help.
You shouldn't be treating your quote unquote academic work the way that parents treat books that they do and don't let in the house for their kids to read. That's what I feel like this is essentially doing.
Yes, exactly.
If you're a good Christian, you don't want to read
God,
those wrong books.
Yes. No.
One of the best known and potentially earliest of the books that weren't included bears the name of one of Jesus' immediate followers. Lost in the sands of Egypt for 1,800 years.
Oh, there's that's
its opening line
I
sets the stage.
that picture. That was that you took your one of the pictures of Wes for your thumbnail from that shot, didn't you? I think I gotta pull this up because this is when I saw that, I said this to
the
a
one where
friend
he's
of
looking
mine.
up.
Yeah, where he's looking up pensively. I said I quite like the picture of him on the left staring into the clouds and longing for Jesus to appear and hand over a first century copy of Mark's gospel.
That's why I picked all those pictures. It's like they're all so posed.
Oh,
like
yes.
I feel like he's trying to give a Christian the impression that he's walking in, looking around at these things, waiting for the next hieroglyphic that he can go study closely to find out if he learns anything about the Bible. Like, come on.
Right. Oh, yes.
I mean, what he's done is meant to be understood vaguely. You know, I don't think, but it's just supposed to give this air of smartness. But when you really think about what he's doing, it's just so absurd.
It really is. It really is.
These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke, and which Didymus, Judas, Thomas wrote down.
He narrated that very well.
We're here in Egypt, sailing on a felucca on the Nile River. And you know, it wasn't far from here, off in the Nag Hammadi desert, where in 1945, a shepherd named Muhammad Ali, along with a number of his companions, were out in the desert looking for fertilizer. Now, what they found with not fertilizer, but their shovels uncovered a body and a 4-foot-high jar. In 1945, a lot of things were happening globally in the European and Pacific theater. Nobody was paying attention to a sheep herder and farmer in the backwaters of Egypt. And yet, a shepherd and farmer named Muhammad Ali in Upper Egypt, in the approximate location
No,
we're at
not that
today,
Muhammad
in
Ali.
Nag Hammadi.
Yeah.
It's a very, very popular name.
Yeah. And also just more of the same. Did getting on that boat and taking that shot of him explain, like he's making it look like by going out to the site of this thing, he's learning more about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
They had to hike through the temple to get to the river, to board the boat, to get down to Nag Hammadi.
We got another super chat. They're really coming through today.
Oh, nice.
Kip offers that course for the right price.
I do. I do sell courses. I don't give them away for free. There's plenty of free stuff on my channel. But I do. If anyone's interested, I have a course on. I'm not sure what course is being referred to, but I have a course on the religions of ancient Israel, and I also am working on courses teaching biblical Hebrew with my friend Josh Bowen at Digital Hammadi right now. So, and there's more to come. I'm going to do a course on the Dead Sea Scrolls in the near future, and I'd really like to do a course on the Babylonian invasion and capture of Jerusalem and the exile. Just like a deep dive thing into the history and how that affected the biblical text. So look for some of this stuff. So
I think I'm reading between the lines here, but I'm pretty sure they're saying that you offer the course how to tell right text from wrong text. That's what I would guess they're referring to.
For a price. Okay. Yeah, that's coming. Absolutely. Is this manuscript true course?
That's really ground level, though, because if you're going to do seriously academic work, you have to start off by making sure you're reading the right text. Otherwise, you're just
it's true.
Who knows
and
what you're doing?
You find them by getting on a boat.
Get on a boat so you can film yourself pointing to where the Dead Sea Scrolls were.
That's right.
I think I see them over there.
Well, so sadly, you can't put boats in the Dead Sea because it's like famously very salty, and your boat will disintegrate. But maybe that's a problem. I can't get into a boat to get to Qumran. But oh well.
I keep waiting for him to like have to run through a closing door, and he dives through and then has to grab his hat on the way through.
Grab the hat.
What he's he's doing everything but that in
is.
terms of pretending to be like a dramatic archaeologist.
I don't know if you've noticed this. Maybe you've noticed. I hope people in the chat, let me know if you've noticed this. But there are a number of a handful of these Christian apologetics types who really lean into like the archaeology and the material culture and manuscript and textual history of the text. And this is something that they all really like to promote, is how much like a real life Indiana Jones they actually are. They buy the hats, and they even put there's a story of the curator of the original curator of the collection of artifacts at the Museum of the Bible was a man by the name of Scott Carroll, who openly promoted Indiana Jones as like a role model, and had like the Raiders of the Lost Ark music as his ringtone on his phone, and was commonly described in media and news stories as a quote real life Indiana Jones unquote. Here's the thing. Actual archaeologists, actual scholars of antiquity would blanch at such pompous, ridiculous self-identifiers or descriptions. It's just I have secondhand embarrassment when I see shit like this. It's just bad.
Yeah. It's like if you're a real world spy and you dress up like James Bond to the best of your ability, and it's like okay,
run around with a magnifying glass, right?
Along with a number of his friends looking for fertilizer in the desert, uncovered a large earthenware jar. That jar, chief among its contents, was the Gospel of Thomas. Only 11 years before that, a philosopher and scholar in Germany named Walter Bauer published a famous monograph known as Heresy and Orthodoxy in Earliest Christianity. His thesis...
What's that?
This is a very important book within biblical scholarship, within New Testament studies. Lots of it's dated now, but you mark this was like a landmark work which really basically kind of shifted the conversation, and this is still the direction that New Testament scholars are going today, even though of course it continues to shift and change, right? But anyways, it's Wes doesn't like this book, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
was that the
Wait, are you saying it's the wrong book?
It's the wrong book. It's not the right book. He much,
of early
you know,
Christianity
it wasn't Richard Baucham's book.
Yeah.
So anyway.
theological quagmire. Groups were contending and fighting for who Jesus was. You didn't have just one portrayal of Jesus. And in that sense, it wasn't that there was a Christianity, but Christianities. The discovery of the Gospel of Thomas and other documents like it in 1945 and following confirmed that there were questions as to whether the Gospels that we have in the Bible were really an accurate and historical portrayal of who Jesus was.
That sounds about right.
The big question that comes up that a lot of people ask are, well, what about those other documents? Now, we were just recently in Cairo, Egypt, and we were at the Coptic Museum looking at one of the Nag Hammadi texts, the Gospel of Thomas.
We are here at the Coptic Museum, and I'm looking at the actual first page of the Gospel of Thomas.
So why wasn't that gospel included into our Bible?
You know, we do have these other books, these other gospels.
This reminds me, if you could just pause it for a second. This just reminds me. You had mentioned before we started that you had watched my the video, the film that I made about Josh McDowell. It does kind of remind me of he this is part of his story, right? About this teenager, 19 years old. I mean, and let's extend Wes some credit here. At least he knows what he's doing on you know, a relatively high level. Josh McDowell pretends that he was a 19-year-old kid wandering through the halls of the museums of Europe, looking at ancient manuscripts written in languages that he cannot read, searching for answers as to the truth of the gospel. Like, that just sounds like a bad plan. I mean, he could have, like, it was 1967, I think, when he did this. Back in 1967, he could have just taken a course, right? I mean, he was in college. He could have just taken a course on, you know, the New Testament, and he could have saved himself, I'm sure, at that time, hundreds of dollars. I don't know.
Are you saying he should have listened to a professor like a sheeple instead of doing his own research?
Was Josh McDowell the real pioneer of do your own research? Is that what you're telling me, Zod?
Yeah, doing it at 19 for me to do that would be silly, but to do that at 19 years old, like, that would be dumb in a movie, much less like something you're claiming in real life.
Yes. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Oh, so it just reminded me of that. No shade on Wes, but those, you know, it kind of looked like that.
Yeah, it is very similar to Wes, like, pretending to read hieroglyphics in terms of just pure.
True. Yes. Right. Yeah.
With names like Peter and Thomas and Mary attached to them. Nowadays, plagiarism is I take your work, Andy, and I put my name on because I know you're smart and I want to sound smart too. But realistically, nobody's going to read the
those
Gospel of Wes.
self-deprecating Canadians.
However, the early Christians knew who people like Peter and James and John were. And so instead of taking your work and putting my name on, I'm going to take my work, I'm going to take my ideas and my ideologies and concepts, and I'm going to put your name on it.
So in other words, if you want to get more readership, if you want more people to buy into the book, put a name, attach a name to it that they're going to recognize.
And yeah, exactly. And so you had these ancient groups that we refer to as the Gnostics, the Docetics. And what they did is they appropriated Jesus and put their theology on the lips of Jesus in later centuries, and then they attached the names for credibility's sake to those documents. But we know, based on both the content and based on how we date these manuscripts, that they're coming from times when Thomas, when Peter, when Mary, when Judas were long dead.
Many
from the manuscripts. Shall we pause it there and maybe talk a little bit about the manuscripts, Zod? Because I have something. Go ahead.
Before we get into that, can I just bring up a side thing based on just how he's approaching this? I know there's a lot there to delve into, but what I love is, like, any intelligent person approaching that time period and what was happening there and stuff like that, I think they would understand that everybody is building some idea of who Jesus is. That's just basic understanding of how somebody
That's what the
constructs
Gospels are
meaning
doing, right?
Yeah, that's just how that's how you construct a headcanon or some kind of lore, whether it's through things you've heard or through books or whatever. You're forming an idea of who this character was, and anybody who's approaching this seriously at all should just understand that everybody back there was doing that. But Wes is starting with this assumption again that they're just like there are right books, there is a right Jesus, and it's just these other pockets of people who are constructing the wrong one. And again, that is just so deeply unserious and so obviously, it's just purely apologetics directed and not scholarly directed. Or
and
not,
this is
not even
so this is
forget scholarship, it doesn't even have basic human curiosity to it. And that's what I find sad.
Yeah. And this is the part too that really I talked a little bit about this when we started, and this is the part that I think really bugs me, is the ways in which people like Wes, like Josh McDowell before him, like they attach J. Warner Wallace does this too, right? They attach the significance of this to manuscripts. But here's the one of the things that Wes is going to point out at some point. I'm not entirely sure where, but it is coming up. One of the things that he's going to point out, and he's hinted at this already, is that these texts, these Nag Hammadi, these so-called Gnostic alternative gospels, the wrong books, they're late, right? Very late. They are not early and reliable like the right books that are in our New Testament. They're very late, and we know that they're very late because of the manuscripts, right? Like the Nag Hammadi collection of manuscripts, the ones that he's been talking about to this point, date, I believe, to the 4th century CE, which in terms of like New Testament manuscripts is actually quite early, but the mother lode, the Holy Grail of New Testament manuscripts would be a 1st century manuscript. There aren't any of those. There's zero. There are no manuscripts that date to the 1st century. The next best thing is a 2nd century manuscript, and we have all of like 4 of those. We've got like P-52, which is generally regarded to be the oldest New Testament manuscript. He actually showed a picture of it at the beginning. This is I have a puzzle. It's
oh, nice.
This is my P-52 puzzle that I picked up at the John Rylands library at the University of Manchester, which is my alma mater. That's where P-52 is. It's scholars tend to date it to the 2nd half of the 2nd century, so like 150 to 200 BCE. There's another very, very impressive manuscript called P-66, which is an entirely nearly intact copy, like a complete codex of the Gospel of John that dates to about 200. And then there's a couple of other manuscript fragments, right, from Matthew's Gospel and from Luke's Gospel. So these are like the earliest New Testament manuscripts. You've got a couple of copies of the Gospel of John, a couple of copies of, or a copy of the Gospel of Matthew, a copy of the Gospel of Luke. This is very interesting to me. Like the implication here is that all of our information about something like the Gospel of Thomas is later. The Nag Hammadi manuscripts, which at least one of which contained a copy of the Gospel of Thomas, it's like 4th century, right? It's later. Therefore, it's not as good. It's not the right book. It's not as reliable. We know these things were written later. It's very interesting. There's you've probably never heard of P-Oxy 5575.
No,
I'm guessing, Zod. So this is there's another site in Egypt where literally thousands of manuscripts, and these are not just New Testament manuscripts. Those ones tend to get all the press, but these are literally thousands of all sorts of manuscripts came out of a garbage dump at a place called Oxyrhynchus in Egypt. They were discovered, it was well over 100 years ago. It was like still in the late 19th century, I believe. They're still sorting through them. There's so many. They're still working on getting all this stuff published because there's so many. Just recently, within the last year, maybe 2 years now, a new volume of the Egypt Exploration Society, which is the group that publishes the Oxyrhynchus papyri, they published a new volume which contained this manuscript. And if you could, I've got it in if you could just put my screen share up right now, I'll show this to you. So this is P-Oxy 5575. And you'll notice it's just a single little fragment. That's 2 pictures of the same fragment. The one is the what's called the verso side, and the other is the recto side, so the front and the back. So we know it's from a codex, so from a book, like it was written on facing pages. This is an intensely interesting manuscript for 2 features. In the first place, this manuscript is really, really old. This is a 2nd century manuscript. And if you remember what I told you, we've got like 4 or 5 of those. Now we've got this. So this is potentially the oldest Christian manuscript. It could be. We don't know. Probably isn't, but it could be the earliest Christian manuscript. What's on it, you might ask? Well, I'll show you this next picture. I think illustrates it quite well. Oh no, not that one. Is it over here? There it is. So this is it's all Greek, so nobody can read it except for maybe a couple people I recognized in the chat. So on the left-hand side, you've got what's reconstructed in the text of this fragment, P-Oxy 5575. In the next column to the right, you've got text from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6, verses 25 to 26. And in the next one, you've got the parallel text in Luke, chapter 12, verses 22 to 24. Now, this is very interesting. Look what's in the far right-hand column there, Zod. You've got text from the Gospel of Thomas intermixed with text from what we would call Q, or the common text behind Matthew and Luke, on this fragment. So this is potentially the oldest Christian manuscript, and it contains a text that looks like it's just a conflation of things that we also read in Matthew and Luke, as well as the Gospel of Thomas. And I'll just I'll just read a little bit of this to you. On the recto side, it says, the rich man died. I tell you, don't be anxious about your life, what you'll eat, nor the body, what you'll wear, because I tell you, like, this sounds familiar, right? Matthew chapter 6 is from the Sermon on the Mount. But now it says, because I tell you, unless you fast from the world, you'll never find the kingdom. Well, that's odd. That doesn't sound quite right. Where is that? That's from the Gospel of Thomas, right? And then it continues, unless you something the world, you'll never something the Father, something about the birds, and your heavenly Father feeds them. And then on the verso side, it talks about how Solomon in his glory and the Father clothes the grass, which dries up and is thrown in the oven. He'll clothe you. So the point here is the point that I really want to make is that Wes is leaning hard into what he considers to be the strong evidence for the antiquity of the New Testament Gospels by pointing to manuscripts. The oldest manuscripts we have are these gospel texts, these ones that we know. That's how we know they're the right books. P5575 has thrown a kink into that argument, because now potentially the oldest Christian manuscript is this strange text which looks like an amalgamation of gospel stuff, but it's not just Matthew and Luke, it's also Gospel of Thomas. I happen to know the editor of this manuscript. His name is Michael Holmes. We can put this down now. I happen to know Michael Holmes. He's a friend of mine. I used to work for him a number of years ago. He edited this manuscript, and I had lunch with him back in November and had the opportunity to talk to him about this manuscript. And I just asked him straight up while we were eating our fish tacos and drinking our Coronas. I said, Mike, P5575, what is it? And he said to me, it is an early proto-gospel. It's an early form of a gospel that basically predates gospels, which I think is really exciting, and I think is one of the I guess dirty little secrets about manuscripts that Christian apologists like Wes Huff don't like to talk about. Amidst this plethora of manuscript fragments which indicate to us, which provide us information about the text that we already have, every now and then you encounter something like P-Oxy 5575, which shows to us this picture. It's way more complicated than that. The earliest Christian manuscript we have might not even be one of the New Testament Gospels. Like, that's kind of crazy when you
that's interesting.
set that against the story that Wes Huff is trying to tell you.
Huh. Yeah, that stuff I'd never known. Like, I deal with this obviously on a very surface level, and most of this stuff is absurd on a surface level. Like,
Yeah.
who knows what came in that dark century at the beginning that led to the Gospels. Who knows, a lot of this can be accounted for by the church saving the books it wanted to save and destroying the ones it wanted to destroy. And beside that, the whole question of using which manuscripts are oldest to feed into the question of, can I trust, this is the absolute word of God? And all that kind of stuff is, that's all obviously ridiculous. But I didn't know that on top of that, there's this much question about which manuscripts are oldest. So that I learned something new today.
Oh, it's an ongoing question. And the reason being, because the way that we date these things, you can't. So lots of our fragments are small, right? Like this, this one is like P52 is about that big. Like, it's the size of a credit card, right? They're tiny. That's all of it. That's the whole thing. So they're tiny. The vast majority of them, you can't carbon date them because you have to combust the material. You have to actually destroy it in order to figure out how old it is. We don't like to do that with manuscripts that have actual writing on them. So the ways in which most of these are dated is through the handwriting style. And you can imagine it's pretty good. Like the system is, I would say, generally reliable, accurate, useful, but definitely imprecise and definitely has some problems and some holes. So when you hear about manuscript dating, oftentimes scholars will give you a range. It's usually a range of like anywhere from 50 to 100 years in terms of how old a particular manuscript is. So when it comes to something like P52, very often you'll hear Christian apologists talk about how it dates back to 125 CE. It almost certainly doesn't, but that's on the extreme end of the range, right? It dates properly from 125 to 200 CE, you know, this 75-year window. Another friend of mine who's an excellent paleographer, Brett Nongbury, who works at the MF Norwegian School of Theology in Oslo, says 125 is way too early anyways. Like I wouldn't even consider that. He says, you know, like 150, maybe, probably 200. So like it's yeah, it's very imprecise work. Which is why when scholars do this kind of stuff, we have to be pretty careful and measured in the ways in which we talk about it.
Interesting. Well, at this point, I'm probably at I don't know where you're at with time, but I probably need to be done in about 10 to 15 minutes. Do you want to watch a little bit more still, or?
Sure. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Ancient texts like the Nag Hammadi library ended up in small villages in rural Egypt, found by farmers and in some cases archaeologists. Documents like the Gospel of Thomas, Philip, and Judas found their origins with a number of mystic religious sects from across the ancient world.
But not Christian sects. There are these mysterious religious sects that are clearly not Christian, have nothing to do with Christianity.
Yeah. The true followers of Christ were contending with all these weird people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, David, I am about to turn into a pumpkin. I was telling Kip at the beginning of this, I literally drive home and run down and start the show without eating or anything. So and then also I'm getting to that point where if I sit too much longer, my back's going to start having issues. So I have to think about how long I'm going for that reason.
Sitting. Yeah.
I would love to keep doing this for another hour or so, but I think I would really regret it in terms of my back spasming out tomorrow. Jessica Bell said, fantastic live stream. What a roller coaster. Thank you so much, both Sod and Kip. Thank you. And thank you for the super
Jessica.
chat.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been really fun having you on. Like, this is super interesting. And I've been dying to get your perspective on all this stuff.
It's a little different what you usually do. And I'm not nearly as funny as Dan, I'm afraid. But it's yeah.
No, this is still really like there's like, I don't know, I'm not discounting what we do. We horse around and we have fun and stuff like that. But there is something to getting a little deeper into the meat of things, and you explain it really well and it's very engaging, so I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I do love this Toyota Land Cruiser that they're driving though.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's so far, that's the best thing about this video is the badass Toyota Land Cruiser with the snorkel. That was pretty great. I feel like I've maybe got my money's worth now. Thank you.
Plow King said you're smarter than Baggy, by the way. So you
Ooh. Oh wow. That's
add
that's
that to your
high
academic
praise.
credentials.
That's going right at the top of the CV there.
Smarter than a paper bag character from Zanza.
And we are quite literally in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful. It's very hot.
Okay.
And
yeah, I wish you'd look up the word.
I'm sure the people who live in that building right are happy to hear that you're out in the middle of nowhere.
I think that's peak Orientalism right there.
Yeah, right.
There are no tourists here. We're in this lodge, and we are the only guests, I'm sure the only guests they've seen in a very long time.
Sure.
After they discovered the Nag Hammadi library in the desert, Muhammad Ali and his brother brought the documents here to Al-Qasr, the oasis in the desert. Not knowing what they really were, some were burned and destroyed, while others were collected and eventually got in the hands of antiquity dealers.
I feel like I need to say something about this.
Yeah.
Because this is one of these things. The Nag Hammadi library was discovered right around the same time, 1945. The Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947. One of the interesting things about both discoveries is the ways in which the stories about the discoveries have been told. And more recently, a number of scholars have been looking at Orientalist tropes that tend to follow these sorts of white savior discovery narratives that feature the dumb Arabs who didn't even know what they were looking at. Oh my God.
Yeah.
What are these dummies? He actually threw, he just used these books to stoke his fireplace. Oh my God, what a moron. When it comes to the Dead Sea Scrolls, the story is repeated about how the antiquities dealer who bought the first of the scrolls from the Bedouin who found them was a cobbler, and he must have bought them because he thought they would make good leather for making shoes, right? Like it, but it just, the ways in which these stories, and these are stories. Think about this. These are stories from like the late 40s. If we have questions about the ways in which scholars were telling these stories in the 40s, I mean, how confident could we be about things that people were writing in the 1st and 2nd century to provide an accurate, clear picture about their world? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Yeah. My brother, he used to be an atheist YouTuber back in the day, and he made a video. So it was like so ignorant it's magic or something like that. And one point he made, it's a simple little point, but imagine Jesus like being a filthy person with bad teeth, basically. Like if you really try to picture, we have such a sanitized picture of them, but you would probably see them as people like this in the middle of nowhere who are even more exotic, or who knows what they would do with a text, a little scrap of ancient text or whatever. And
right,
it kind of, I don't know, they have this automatic way of viewing people like this that I don't think they're trying to be really malicious or anything, but there is kind of this patronizing image of the locals that is coming through pretty thick in this. And when you consider that these church fathers that you think of as just absolute geniuses were probably less educated than the average person you're happening to film in the middle of Egypt right here. And,
that's right. Yeah. It's true.
I don't know if it's entirely true, but there's this meme that goes around. You might have seen it that said like, you knew more by the time you're in 5th grade than all the church fathers did together or something like that.
Jeez. I don't know about that, but I mean, it's not like it probably provides some accurate relative perspective in terms of just collectively how much more we know now than we ever have, right? I was just talking about this earlier on Mark Reed's channel about how one of the reasons why specializations, when you get to the point of a terminal degree, like an MA or a PhD, specializations continue to get narrower and narrower and narrower. The reason for that is because like our knowledge base is just exploding. Like there's just such a massive increase of information and knowledge on a regular basis. It's just impossible to keep up with everything, right? So I think it's kind of illustrative of that fact when, like, you know, the early church fathers could practically read everything in circulation in the entire in their entire world, right?
Yeah.
You could do that. That's impossible now. And I think it just goes to show you how much more we as a culture or as you know, civilized humans know than we ever did,
Yeah.
if not individuals.
Yeah, you could obviously take that comment too far and take it to mean that they were just
Yeah.
ignorant morons, which I don't think is accurate. The only
Right.
way that's possibly true is that there is just so much knowledge in the world right now that they're just, and that does speak some truth to whether you should really revere what these people say and think that they have actual crazy insights. Like, you don't want these inflated ideas of what they knew and what they could tell us about ourselves. And I think showing how little knowledge they had access to can help, you know, deflate that image a little bit. But again, you don't want to treat them like they're morons just because they didn't have the body of information we do. And they
Exactly.
did have ways of being smart in terms of operating within their environment.
Oh,
Like, that's just,
yeah, absolutely. And I think I like Ed Zachary has made this point too in the chat. And I try to make this clear to people because I get accused of this all the time of the cardinal sin of what's called presentism, which is a term I actually learned only from Christian apologists, who insist that when we talk about, you know, antiquity, and when we present in particular ancient mythology or this ancient fabled literature, because so many people now take it seriously, that the implication of that is that all these people in antiquity were dumb.
yeah.
And that is absolutely not the case. In fact, I would say the opposite. I would say that I have an enormous amount of respect as a scholar of ancient texts for the people who produced them, just because I have a clear understanding of the sort of tremendous effort that goes into just writing something, you know, in the Roman Empire compared to now. It was such a monumental task and achievement. And again, just by virtue of the fact that the world was so different back then. So yeah, but I guess it's about time to shut things down, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you being on. I think that is an important point. And one thing about just biblical fundamentalism is it paints a kind of patronizing picture of the people in the past. Like, I think they probably understood a lot of the nuance and the symbolism of the stories they're writing.
I think
And
so
when you
too.
take it all as just pure literal history, yeah, it makes them
In so many ways,
yeah. It's
they
not the
understood
text,
this
it's the
stuff
way
so
you
much
read the
better, right?
text.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So
But anyway, yeah, I think we're at a natural stopping point here. I really appreciate you being on. This was a lot of fun.
this was
And
fun.
it was,
I had fun.
I've seen your smart comments scrolling through the chat over and over again. So it's nice to have you on and actually get a little more of this insight. And yeah.
Well, that's good. It's what I like to do. I like to help people understand cool shit about the Bible. So I think we did some of that today, which is great.
Yeah, I do. I am sad that we missed one part of the video I was really looking forward to, which he talks about in these other gospels and texts. It's not even a
where
proper
there's
gospel because
yeah.
it's just a
Oh my
bunch of
God.
sayings. And they say such ridiculous things like a man becomes a woman to enter the kingdom of. I'm like, yeah, that sounds. He's like, he even says it sounds ridiculous to modern ears. I'm like, Wes, do you understand why that sounds ridiculous to modern ears and the gospels don't? It's because you've been immersed in this string of absurd stories about the supernatural, and you've become acclimated to them, make
Yes.
excuses for them.
A
And you said,
woman
has Jesus running
becomes
around saying these-
pregnant
Yeah.
by the Holy Spirit, right? Like,
Yeah.
the graves of the saints opened up and they walked around. Like it just it's there's lots of it. Jesus put mud on the eyes of a blind man, right? Just in order. And oh no, oh wow, he could see because of that for some fucking reason. Like we are so conditioned to reading these texts in a certain ways, and I think that's part of it too, right? Like uh they don't sound like gospels, which is sort of a self-fulfilling thing. Like gospel
Yeah.
is this thing that was sort of invented out of the fact that somebody at some point decided it's just these 4 texts that are going to be the ones on which we base our understanding of the historical Jesus. But I haven't seen nearly enough early Christian literature. I don't spend a lot of time there, but the bits that I do know are that I think these are sort of the exceptional texts in terms of the fact that they're the outliers. Usually that's not necessarily indicative of what most people were thinking. That's actually kind of it's sort of the minority voice. The rest of Christendom was circulating things like the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Judas, and like this is exactly what Walter Bauer was getting at when he wrote that book, right? Orthodoxy and Heresy. The point that he was making was that there's this super dynamic picture of early Christianity that we have not enough access to because not enough texts were preserved over the course of time for various political theological reasons. But there are some things that we can see in some of these texts that we do have, which seem to indicate that Christianity in the 2nd century, to say nothing for the 1st century, was fucking weird. Like, totally different from anything that we have today. So,
Wait, are you trying to tell me that starting in the year 34 AD, we didn't have a body of Christians who basically believed what modern evangelicalism did until the Catholics came and ruined it, and then Martin Luther fixed it, and then you're blowing my mind, man.
I know, right? Like it's weird. It's weird because you get this, you grow up with this sense, and you're fed this. I mean, this is why History Channel makes these dumb documentaries about secret gospels with these sensationalistic headlines, because some of these texts are really, really, to our modern eyes and ears, bizarre. And he makes this point, right? Like, it just sounds weird. It doesn't sound like anything I would write. It doesn't sound like a sober history of Jesus, therefore must be fake. But you're reading this as a 21st century person who's been saturated, literally stewing in this post-Christian culture for your entire life, that's been grounded in thousands at this point years of Christian hegemony. It just it changes your entire perspective of these things. But I should shut up, otherwise I will talk all night, as I am wont to do.
No, it's good stuff. But not just the miracles, not to set you off again, but not just the miracles, but even what Jesus says. Like he said, these sayings had Jesus saying crazy things. But as crazy as Jesus saying to cut off your hand if it makes you sin. But the problem is you've lived in a culture that has made excuses for these. So you got to take that in context.
I mean,
you would have done the same thing with the stuff in the other gospels. Sorry, go ahead.
If you were a serious Christian, paraphrasing Jesus here, if you were really, really serious about the kingdom, maybe you would be a eunuch. You might want to do that. So that's, that's the part of Matthew 19 that nobody likes to quote, but it's there. It's right in there. Yeah.
But that's at the core of how Wes approaches this. This sounds familiar to me because I heard it in Sunday school and grew up with it. So this is the norm, and it doesn't matter where that norm came from or why it's normal to me.
Which is the tragic misdirection here, because Wes is a fucking PhD student at the University of Toronto, who should not be entertaining Sunday school stories.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good last thought for this whole thing. Unless you have anything else you want to share or promote or anything else before we go.
I don't want to wreck it now.
All right, sounds good.
I'll just tell everybody. David Carr is going to be on my channel tomorrow. I think there's like 170 people watching. So I hope you're all show up. It's at noon Eastern, 3 o'clock Pacific. I know that can be a tough time for people to pop in and watch the live stream, but it's going to be goddamn amazing to get like an actual expert. Something else that apologists don't have a tendency to do. I don't know how much. I mean, you've spent some time watching apologists on YouTube. One of the things that they seem loath to do is to talk to actual experts, actual biblical scholars about the Bible. Instead of talking to somebody who actually knows what the hell they're doing, Gavin Ortland decides to have Michael Jones on to talk about the conquest of Canaan. Like, what the hell? What are you doing? No, I'm going to talk to an actual expert in the field about the composition of the Pentateuch tomorrow at noon.
Cool. Well, everybody make sure to be there. I'll try to tune in my best if I can from work. So, all right. Well,
you're at work. You're not doing anything important. You can do it. It's fine. It's totally fine.
Well, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining me again.
Voy a cantar esta canción con mucho cariño de mi corazón a la República Dominicana, la casa del merengue y la casa de la bachata. Voy a cantar esta canción con mucho cariño de mi corazón a la República Dominicana, la casa del merengue y la casa de la bachata. La 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 la, la casa del merengue. La 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 la, y la casa de la bachata. Música, 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 te traigo música, música.